The American Revolution, A Legacy of Rebelling Against Overreaching Governments, presented by Walker Fox. So a crucial part of the American Revolution and several revolutions and rebellions that have followed it are touchstone documents that were produced by the revolution itself. So on the left, we have the Declaration of Independence, which is definitely a huge reference point for people or for groups of people that want to separate themselves from an overreaching government. Basically, the Declaration of Independence just states, it talks about how the British Empire, has violated their constitutional rights and they're mistreating the colonists, and so the colonists claimed it was their civic duty to rebel and fight against that government. And on the right, we have the U.S. Constitution, the Bill of Rights more specifically, which is also super important. So for the American Revolution itself, the colonists, they believed that the British Empire was violating their own English Bill of Rights by denying the colonists adequate representation in Parliament. And so that's why they wrote this declaration here on the left, to form their own independent nation where they'd be able to represent themselves and tax themselves in the way that they wanted to. So it wasn't too long after the American Revolution that we saw these documents being touched upon, specifically by the people of Texas. So in 1836, the territories of Texas belonged to the government of Mexico, and the government of Mexico was making some, huge changes that the people of Texas didn't really like all that much. They felt like they were no longer being represented fairly, and they felt like they felt like the Mexican government was kind of stomping and burning their constitution. So just like, the colonists in the American Revolution, they wrote their own Declaration of Independence. In this declaration, they state, the Mexican government, by its colonization laws, invited and induced the Anglo-American population of Texas to colonize its wilderness under the pledged faith of a written constitution, that they should continue to enjoy that constitutional liberty and republican government to which they had been habituated in the land of their birth, the United States of America. In this expectation, they have been cruelly disappointed, inasmuch as the Mexican nation has acquiesced in the late changes made in the government by General Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna, who has overturned the constitution of his country, and now offers us the cruel alternative either to abandon our homes, acquired by so many privations, or submit to the most intolerable of all tyranny, the combined despotism of the sword and the priesthood. And that's from source one, the Texas Declaration of Independence. So basically, they're talking about how the Mexican government is going through some huge transformational changes, and basically they're becoming more not representing the people of Texas fairly. They're becoming more, arbitrary and powerful. They mentioned despotism and the sword and the priesthood. So basically, they're ruling with an iron fist, with an iron fist and religion versus it, honoring their constitution and honoring the people's basic rights. So because of those violations of their constitutions, they wrote, the Texas Declaration of Independence also claims this. These and other grievances were patiently borne by the people of Texas until they reached the point at which forbearance ceases to be a virtue. We then took up arms in defense of the national constitution. So, very, very similar. You could tell that these people were heavily inspired by the American Revolution. They had their constitutional rights that they felt entitled to, and they saw their Mexican government kind of turn on them and become a tyrannical, overpowering government that didn't represent them. So they declared their independence and fought to make it happen, just like the colonists did. All right, so not long after the Texas Declaration of Independence, South Carolina and the other southern states of the U.S. began to feel pretty unrepresented by the U.S. government. So they formed their own Declaration of Independence, which was the Ordinance of Secession. So in South Carolina's Ordinance of Secession, they state, the ends for which the Constitution was framed are declared by itself to be to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterior. So they claim what the Constitution's purpose is, and that's to basically protect their rights and protect their peace as a union of states. And they claim, we affirm that these ends for which the government was instituted have been defeated, and the government itself has been made destructive of them by the actions of the non-slaveholding states. Those states have assumed the right of deciding upon the property of our domestic institutions, and they have denied the rights of property established in 15 of the states and recognized by the Constitution. So they're just claiming that basically the U.S. government, they're favoring these non-slaveholding states, and they're governing them, but they're not really representing these slaveholding states, and by doing that, they're threatening their constitutional rights. They're not honoring they weren't honoring the southern states' rights to own and retain their slave labor. In this last quote, they say, "We, therefore, the people of South Carolina, by our delegates and convention assembled, appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world for the rectitude of our intentions, have solemnly declared that the Union heretofore existing between this state and the other states of North America is dissolved, and that the state of South Carolina has resumed her position among the nations of the world as a separate and independent state." So that's kind of just their, Declaration of Independence part. So, ultimately these southern states, they feared that the federal government was a threat to their institution of slavery, and the institution of slavery was the absolute backbone of their economy and their culture. So by attacking, by being hostile towards the institution of slavery, they were being hostile towards the southern states, and these southern states felt like the federal government was kind of trampling on the Constitution by not honoring their Fourth Amendment and their rights to their property. So they declared their independence just like the founding fathers did from Great Britain. All right, a little bit down the road, we have the Tea Party movement of 2010, which kind of followed the election of Obama and the establishment of Obamacare and certain things like that. So in their Tea Party movement, their Tea Party declaration, they claim, "For much of its history, the United States has been a land of prosperity and liberty. Sound policies such as fiscal responsibility, constitutionally limited government, and a belief in the free market have safeguarded this condition. In recent years, however, Congress, the President, the Federal Reserve Board, and the courts have replaced those practices with profligate government spending and expansion of the government power beyond what is constitutionally permissible." So I think they're referring to things like Obamacare and increases in taxes that they didn't like. Kind of similar to the last few instances, these people just didn't feel represented by the Obama administration. These working class people didn't want to, have any kind of increases in their taxes to pay for other people's health care or anything like that. And they also state, "We reject all acts that ignore or diminish the Second and 10th Amendments to the U.S. Constitution, and we seek to have all powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution to be reserved to the states respectively." So during the Obama presidency, I'm sure the anti-gun, anti-Second Amendment, agenda has definitely started growing and uprising, and just like the people of Texas and the people of the southern states in the Civil War and the people of the colonies during the Revolutionary War, these people, they were proud of their Constitution that protected their rights, to bear arms, and not only were they proud to be able to bear arms, they were also proud to have a government that was limited and didn't overtax them, and so they kind of wrote this Declaration of Independence. But the Tea Party Declaration, they weren't declaring independence from the U.S. government. They were more declaring independence from the Democratic and Republican parties to kind of start like a true American party of, which was based on the foundations of limited government and protecting constitutional rights. So in their last quote here, they say, "We are united in our common belief in fiscal responsibility, constitutionally limited government, and free markets. This threefold purpose is the source of our unity in the Tea Party movement." So that's, kind of what I just was talking about. These people, they weren't trying to overthrow the government necessarily, but they wanted to break away from the, Democrat versus Republican debate, because they didn't feel like the Democrats represented anybody, and they didn't feel like the Republicans really represented anybody adequately either. So they wanted to kind of go back to the American Revolution's roots of adequate representation for our taxes and protecting our constitutional rights. So ultimately, the American Revolution has served as a touchstone for different groups of people to stand up to governments that they see as overreaching or overpowering or violating their constitution. So just like the colonists, they felt like the British Empire was violating their own English Bill of Rights. So they felt, obliged to declare independence and form their own government. The people of Texas did the same thing when the Mexican government was trampling on their constitution and failing to represent them. And the people of the southern states, tried to do the same thing whenever they felt like the federal government was moving in a direction that they couldn't stand with. And once again, at the recent Tea Party movement, the people of the U.S. kind of feel overwhelmed by the increasing power of the federal government and all the hate towards the Second Amendment and some of the other amendments that are being attacked as well. But so it's definitely started the touchstone for people to rebel against things that they see as overpowering. That's what the colonists did, and it worked out for them. It's led to all kinds of prosperity. So I think people take pride in that, and they want to, whenever they see that happening to themselves, or they feel like their own government's not representing them anymore, they feel like it's it's in their own hands to declare independence and fight for it. And so I think people take pride in that, the idea of being able to rebel and stand up for what you believe in against the government. Kind of like this guy here with his sign that says, "I love our country. It's our government that I'm afraid of." And I think the colonists in the Revolution felt that way. The people of Texas probably felt that way. We know the people of Texas love Texas, but they don't like the government all that much. They'll stand for Texas 10 times over before they stand for some government institution. And same with the southern states. They love their country, they love their rights, but they didn't care for the government. And Tea Party movement, just this picture I think here is from the Tea Party movement of 2010. So these people, they love their country, they're proud of it, but they don't stand for a government that they feel like is violating their constitution. And here's my reference list. Source 1 is Texas Declaration of Independence. Source 2, South Carolina's Ordinance of Secession. And source 3, the Tea Party Declaration. Thank you, guys.